Hello everybody, and welcome to the first video on my new channel, Coding Catalyst. Welcome. I'm starting this channel with the goal of providing educational and mostly just assistive resources to young engineers either entering the workforce, finishing their time in university in the course of engineering, or people who maybe are not taking the traditional university route but are doing coding boot camps or self-teaching and trying to break into the industry themselves. And the first thing I want to tackle when I introduce us to this new channel is the coding challenge part of the interview process. So let's go ahead and get started. So first of all, I guess one thing you're wondering is, who am I? Why should you listen to me? Why do I have any authority to give you feedback, tips, or knowledge on this specific area? Well, I graduated from the University of Michigan in Ann Arbor, specifically in computer science through the School of LSA. I work in software engineering now. I particularly work on flight software, but I've also been given tasks in the realm of flight simulation, and I've also had responsibilities in test automation before. And I've also worked on several personal projects, and I wanted to provide a couple examples here. So I have also worked in web development personally, not professionally, and then also in game development. That would be personally and formally through school classes, but never professionally. Now, one thing I want to get out of the way immediately. I have not worked in recruiting. I've not worked in tech recruiting, nor have I worked in recruiting in any other field. But I've played the game a lot. I've done a lot of interviews. I've been hired many times, and I've been not hired many times. It's all part of the game, and I've been a player for quite a while. So I don't want to take too long on this PowerPoint because I know that, in the end of the day, we're all here for the coding challenges themselves, the knowledge itself. And this introduction, is not really, it's not the most important thing in the grand scheme of things. But I do want to introduce you to my mission starting this channel. My mission is to provide young engineers with perspective on problem solving rather than just problem solutions and walkthroughs. So what does that mean? It means that I want to stay away from the archetype of channel or content that is a how do I solve this problem and then a screen shared walkthrough of how that problem is solved. And I don't want to take anything away from the value of those kinds of videos and that kind of content because it is extremely valuable to see somebody else's approach to solving a problem from beginning to end. And oftentimes when you have a deadline for a project and you need to push that through, then you just need the quick, easy, down and dirty solutions to certain kinds of problems. And a lot of problems come up a lot. So having that solution programmed into the back of your head is never a bad thing. But what sets my channel apart and what I want to do differently from that kind of mainstream of tech walkthrough and tech tutorial is I want to focus more on the problem-solving steps rather than the achieving a solution step. So I want to talk about how do we approach problems. What are different ways that we can understand the problem and then understand coming to a solution more in the head than in the IDE or in the text editor. So what content do I have planned for this channel so far? Right now, and this is actually the first, what the first episode will focus on is coding challenge approaches, as I have just mentioned. So what I want to do is I want to take a look at different coding challenges that are often used in interviews or are specifically challenging for a lot of people who are watching the channel. I know we don't have any viewers yet because it's the first video, but hopefully if this channel ends up taking off, people will have problems that they would like to see solved, or questions, or just challenges that they think would be interesting content on this channel. And I want to take a look at approaching those problems without really giving a walkthrough, perspective, but more giving a how do I think about it? How do I even approach coming up with a solution rather than, implementing it physically on the keyboard? Recruitment guidance and tips. That will take form in this first line here, coding challenge approaches, but also later down the line. If anyone ever has questions and wants to put them in the comments of videos or send them to me directly, I'll be more than happy to engage with you and help you understand some of the caveats of, the crazy world that is technology and professional work in tech. But as it's important to remember, I have not worked directly in recruiting. I have never worked in, I've never recruited anybody. I've never been an interviewer, and I've never actually made hiring decisions. And then also later down the line, I put an asterisk here because it's more of a potential thing, but maybe later on, an introduction to programming languages. And what I think I would want to do to set myself apart from other channels in that respect is maybe do introductions to programming languages from a different learning process. Maybe try something like project-based learning rather than, fundamentally approached learning. Like learning the fundamentals of a language and then using that to accomplish harder and harder tasks. Maybe we try a project-based approach where each new video I present a problem or some kind of program I want to create or some kind of problem I want to solve, and then we go through some coding documentation or some coding concepts together, specifically in service of solving that problem, rather than just taking a fundamental approach, because you can already find that fundamental approach a million different places on YouTube. You don't need to see me do it too. Now, there's also things I want to avoid here, things I don't want to do. I don't want a handhold. So when I make these videos in the challenge series, I don't want to hold hands through the challenges. I don't want to give, the direct solution. I don't want to walk you through. It's not a tutorial, right? It's kind of a thought project on process. I want to avoid content copying. I don't want to fall into any niches that other creators are in. I don't want to step on anybody's toes and become a competitor for anybody in the space that, is already working hard on solving this specific problem. And if you're out there and you think that I'm doing something close to what you're doing, go ahead and reach out and let me know. And then I want to avoid company recruitment leaks. Now, there are a lot of companies out there who will have coding challenges or technical assessments, and you'll notice when you're applying to them, they make you sign agreements with them to say, I will not leak what your coding assessment is or what your technical assessment is. I will not tell people what problems you ask me to solve. And I want to avoid, breaking those boundaries as well. I don't want to, breach the trust with companies and recruiters and put a microscope on their recruiting process for the world to see, because it's not fair to the recruiter and it's not fair to the other recruitees either, especially to yourself, because it's that assessment is an assessment of where you are, and if you appear to be further than you really are, then that can sometimes bite you down the road. So I want to avoid specifically these three things. And an important thing to know is these things I want to avoid, I judge avoiding these specific caveats and as also part of my mission. So they are Schedule 1 priorities for me, just the same as accomplishing the other goals I laid out on the previous slide. If I am breaching these things that I want to avoid, then I will not consider myself as having accomplished the mission I set out for with this channel. Now, a little bit more about the series that we're starting today. I'm going to name it Challenge Catalyst because I want to break down different kinds of coding challenges that might be found on LeetCode or the more popular historical coding interview problems. And we're going to look at things like how to read the question. How do I understand this question? What are the important details of the question? How do I extrapolate the important information out of a long form or short form question in prose? How do I find the numbers, the data, the important deliverables that they're looking for in that prose phrased question? Where do I even start my solution, right? So how do I begin thinking about this problem? And I'm hoping that after we get into this series, eventually we'll end up in a space where, after so many times of looking at how to approach problems and how to approach solutions. It's almost like a practice thing where you train your brain to kind of understand how to approach new problems you haven't seen before. Because a lot of times when you take a coding interview or a coding test for a company, they like to choose pretty niche questions that they don't think have been asked in a long time. And so oftentimes you'll find yourself saying, I've never seen a problem like this before. And you'll end up not knowing anything about how to approach solving it. I've been there too. I've taken coding interviews and coding challenges for companies, and I sat there dumbfounded, looking at the screen, wondering, how did I get here? I've never seen a problem like this before. How do I even approach it? And I hope that, with practice here and with some instruction and guidance here, we don't have to run into that problem anymore. And one more thing, I'm hoping that as things catch on here and as I continue the channel, I want to at the beginning of every video present an interesting fact about myself, and then maybe down the line, if this channel does pick up some viewership, maybe in the comment section each time I'll see some interesting facts about yourselves. I'll share one every time I post, and then maybe some of the viewers can share something about themselves in the comment section. And then I can scroll through the comment section after every video, answer questions, and see some interesting things about all of you guys. So my interesting fact for the day is I served 6 years in the Army Reserve. That's the United States Army Reserve, U.S. Army Reserve. Okay, so that's it for that presentation. So now I want to go on and start talking about one coding problem. We're gonna go ahead and get started today in this video with the introduction, and then we're gonna try the approach to our first coding problem. And that problem is going to be FizzBuzz. You might have heard of FizzBuzz before, or if you haven't heard of the the famous title, maybe you've seen this specific problem before. And the FizzBuzz problem goes, for all integers from 1 to input n, if n is divisible by 3, print fizz. If n is divisible by 5, print buzz. If n is divisible by both 3 and 5, print FizzBuzz. If n is divisible by neither 3 or 5, print integer n. Now, every time this problem's written, it could be written a different way, right? Sometimes they don't even want an input n, right? Sometimes they just say from integers 1 to 100, or something like that, right? Sometimes what they say is instead of printing, right? Instead of printing, they'll say, I want you to put all these things into an array that is one indexed from 1 to 100. And then put into the array the string fizz, the string buzz, the string FizzBuzz, or the integer n as a string. Sometimes that's what they'll ask you for. But we're going to approach the problem in this capacity today because I think it's pretty simple. It doesn't require too much of expanding data types. And once you understand how to approach it in the simplest factors, then it's a pretty easily scalable solution where if they want you to put it in an array, then if you have an understanding of arrays, you'll pretty easily be able to accomplish that on your own without, having to refer to back too much to the approach discussed here. So, one thing I do want to point out is I am recording this video in 2 different parts, and the second part has just started. I just watched over the first part real quick just to make sure sound sounded fine. I didn't lose audio at any point, and I realized there's a couple things that I do as a beginning video maker. I sniffle quite a bit, and I do this weird thing where I click my tongue against the roof of my mouth through my teeth, and after watching, the first 10-minute part of this video, it drove me crazy, and now I hate the sound of it. So, as I become more experienced at creating videos, hopefully I can train myself to not do those things anymore. I just want to get that out of the way and say that real quick, in case it bothered you too. I apologize. So let's talk about the approach to this problem. So we just talked about the differences that we can see, the different variations of this problem we can see. But in any variation of this problem, one thing that we know for sure is that we're going to have to follow some progression of counting integers. And that's really one of the hallmarks of why this problem is so well known. It was so commonly used in the past, and even still sometimes today will be used for as one of the simpler coding challenges. And that is because it tests some of the most important fundamental coding concepts that you could use in a day-to-day coding job. It tests your understanding of loops, right? It tests your understanding of different arithmetic operators. It tests your understanding of input-output. And it tests your understanding of conditionals. It tests all four of these things. It makes sure that you have at least some form of solid understanding of all four of these concepts, which can be really important. It is really important. Don't let me fool you. So, now that we understand the importance of this problem, how can we go about solving it? Let's say we've never seen a problem like this before. This is our first time ever seeing this kind of problem. I'm sure a lot of you have already seen some variation of it before, or a lot of you probably already have ideas of a working solution for this problem. But let's take it step by step for those of us who don't. And for the purpose of this video, I'm going to say I don't either. I've never seen this before. How can I approach solving it? And the first thing that I kind of want to do is I want to understand what is all the important information, outlined in the in variables for this program it wants me to write, or this function it wants me to write. Well, I have to do some kind of test for all integers, right? For all integers from 1 to n. So I have to do some sort of operation for every integer between two sort of invariables, right? This one's an invariable. This is technically a variable, but once it's passed to my function, it will be an invariable. So I just have to take that and I have to say, okay, I'm working with this now. But it is still an input. An important thing to realize is we still want to treat it as an input. Now, what does the program actually want me to do? It wants me to print. Printing will be important here. My output, my, what they're going to run my code against, what they're going to test it against is what I print. So I have to be careful with what I print. That is the deliverable for the function or program it wants me to write. And how do I know what to print? What's important about what I'm printing? Well, I have to pass some sort of conditional. Okay? And they even make it easy for me. They show me there are 4 different potential conditionals that I could follow here. Okay? So now if I break down this problem into, what I've outlined so far as the important bits is for everything from 1 to the input that they give me, I need to check something, run some conditional against that input or against the object that is between my starting point and that input in this case. And then depending on the result of that conditional, I have to print something. And that is the bones of this problem here. That is the core essence of what my logic pathway needs to follow. And now we can look, well, what are these conditionals? What am I checking for? I'm checking for divisibility, right? And in this case, perfect divisibility. Divisibility without remainder. And then I even have, the numbers it wants me to use for those divisions. So that is all, the important data pulled out of here. And I know I underlined basically the entire problem, but the most important thing is I wanted to go in a sequence that kind of outlines, how do I read this problem? What is my approach? And then, once I get that, how do I extract the bones of the problem? What is the logical pathway I need to follow when I write my code? I need to do these things. So the first thing I want to do, and it makes it so easy for us, right? This one in particular makes it so easy for us. It says the word for. It says the word for right here, right? It says, for this, do this. So that kind of tells me, right off the bat, and sometimes it's not always a given. It's not always 100%, but it kind of tells me right off the bat versus, a little bit of critical thinking to see if it's absolutely true. But it kind of says right off the bat, I want to use a for loop. And hopefully I get better at writing with my mouse because I don't feel like buying a tablet. But I do want to be able to do, kind of thinking on these sketch pads. So, I need to do some kind of for loop in my implementation of the solution, right? And I'm not going to write out the specific code. I'm not going to say, what goes in here. I'm not going to give you the perfect for loop, but I'm going to say, the problem wants me to do something a set amount of times. And that sounds a lot like using a for loop. And that, that's language ambidextrous, right? So, or language agnostic, I should say, where I can say, well, in Python, I could use a for loop for this. In C++, I could use a for loop for this. In Java, I could use a for loop for this. The most important thing is logically, I'm using what is known as a for loop in programming to solve this problem because it tells me, it gives me the answer straight away. Use a for loop, right? And one more thing I want to say is I'm going through this process a little bit slowly, but when you sit down and do your challenges, this stuff will fly through your brain. Like it takes to read in your head, it takes like 5 seconds to read this entire block, and then the next couple minutes is what you're gonna spend. We're 8 minutes into this video already, but it'll take a couple minutes for you to pull the bones out of this problem and then get down the important factors you need. I have a for loop, and guess what? I have 4 ifs in my bones, right? And then for each if, I have a print, right? That's the bones of my program. If I were to just put this down into Notepad++ or whatever text editor I want to use or whatever IDE I want to use, I can put for if, and then inside each of those ifs, a print inside each if. And that's the bones of my program. That is like, the important things, right? And even tells me the exact strings it wants me to print. Or in the last case, an integer. It tells me exactly what it wants me to do. And so now, the next step here is basically filling in the logic, right? This is a pretty simple, straightforward question. And one thing I didn't say this at the beginning, but one thing I should kind of point out as kind of one of the more important variables for this project, one of the more important given pieces of information, is that for this specific problem, whoever is asking us this question is asking us to do it within the context of a function already being defined for us, not defined, but declared for us, right? So func FizzBuzz is a function that they're declaring for us, right? And then they want us to do this, implementation, ... And then, at the end, and they want us to do what's in here, right? And so, I guess, let me kind of give us what the parameter, so they're going to give us the parameter integer n when they give us the function as well, okay? And this function is meant to print directly to console output. So so in the event where you're given a problem and they give you kind of like a browser-based text editor or IDE or debugger to write your code, this is what's most likely already going to be written into that, text block for you, and then you work around it. So I can basically take what's in here and put it directly in there, because that's where my solution is going to go. And then, well, I have to finish programming out the rest of my logic. And so the logic will come from, well, what is meant to be inside of my conditionals, well, these things, right? Because it tells me what is meant to be inside these conditionals. And then these things are going to go into these, right? And then, well, what do I print if I enter any of these conditionals? Well, The problem also gives me that, right? So there we go. In this specific example, the problem kind of gives us the program for us, right? And it's just our job to kind of translate it into coding syntax. And this is probably going to be a relatively short video because of how simple and kind of beginner level this challenge is. But one of the hopefully one of the learning outcomes and one of the just overall kind of meta outcomes of starting with this specific problem in my introductory video is I kind of want to give you a taste of what my approach to solving these problems will be and my approach to kind of instruction as I go through these challenges. Because if it's not for you, it's not for you, right? It's not going to be for everybody. Not everyone's going to appreciate this kind of approach. So if it's not, then no hard feelings. You don't really have to keep following along with this. But if it does happen to be, your cup of tea and you want to see some more, then, hopefully more videos are on the way. And hopefully you end up taking something away from this sort of instruction, this style of teaching, this style of walking through problems. And as time goes on, we'll start tackling more complicated problems that take more time, and we'll go back to some easy ones. We'll go to some intermediate ones, and we'll just take things by ear. And if I end up getting a healthy viewer base, you guys can start requesting problems in the comments or in messages to me, as long as they don't break my rule of not breaching trust with recruiters or directly copying content from other creators. Then I will be happy to start taking recommendations from you guys. And this is close to the position where I want to leave things off, because I don't want to start writing actual code here. I want to allow people who haven't seen this problem before to kind of solve it on their own after kind of getting an idea of what an approach would look like to it if they've never seen it. So I'm going to leave, this image like as it is right now. Hopefully you can read everything that I wrote on here. I promise I'll get better at this whole, mouse writing thing. Like, that's not too bad, but as time goes on, hopefully we can grow this channel into an educational and instructive and an assistive platform for those of you who really want to break into this crazy world of tech. And I'm excited and trying to get there together. So thank you for watching this first video. Hopefully the introduction wasn't too boring and this problem was not too simple. I'm sure it will be for some of you, but for those of you who it is not too complicated or not too simple for, I hope you got something out of it. Happy New Year, everybody, and have a good rest of your day.